really exciting to be at the time with the start of the event, and it's just wonderful to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the first flight to Nelson, to hear the story of Shorty Fowler and Tom Newman and the mechanic Ranish, and it's wonderful for the public to be able to come and be part of what we've got.
Well, this aeroplane we're sitting in here is a de Havilland Dominee, also known as a de Havilland Dragon Rapide, DH-89B. Now, she was built in 1943 by Brushwork and Coach over in England, brought straight out here for the RNZAF, and they used her for a few years on their navigation training exercises. And then they were surplus to requirements for the RNZAF as they had new Dominees coming, so they offhanded this Dominee to NAC, which is how she's painted now. She's been repainted in NAC, or National Airways Corporation colours, who is now, of course, Air New Zealand. 100% able to fly airworthy and still carries passengers like she did almost 80 years ago.
Kia ora, Mayor Rachel Reese. I've just stepped off the most wonderful flight of my life, cruising across Nelson and Waimea plains on Tui. What a gorgeous aircraft. This was flying in luxury, down low, comfortable seats and a breeze in my hair, can you believe, with a little window open. So what an incredible celebration this is for our region.
What we're celebrating is the 100th aviation anniversary for Nelson, Tasman. This type of aeroplane, the Dominee, was used with Cook Strait Airways. Now, Cook Strait Airways were, of course, the first airline out of Nelson.
I'm Ian Thompson, and this is my son Nicholas. My grandfather was the managing director of the Cook Strait Airways, which we're very proud of. We've had the most fabulous flight out today. We've always admired the aeroplanes. We've got a model at home built by the apprentices who built these planes. It was lovely to look at all the features in the aeroplane which we see in the model. They are all true and to scale. Absolute delight. The plane was so soft to ride and the seating was fantastic. It's a very special thing to our family.
So this aircraft is a de Havilland 83C. The C's for Canadian model because it's got this canopy behind me. My wife and I purchased the aircraft 3 years ago.
I'm Pip Halley. I own the beloved de Havilland Foxmoth, affectionately called Foxy, with my lovely husband Paul.
There is seating for 3 people up the front, obviously the pilot in the back, and it's powered by a 130 horsepower Gypsy Major 1C. Cruises along at about 80 knots.
Foxy has come over to reenact the flight that was done in 1921 by an Aero 504.
A very beautiful machine. De Havilland was very clever. He made it so that the wings can fold in about 45 seconds for each wing and pop it away in your garage, taking up very little room. She's a beautiful, beautiful piece of history.
We were invited over to partake in the celebrations this week with the Anson. We normally keep it at Omaka Airfield in Blenheim. but it was actually restored here in Nelson and did its first flights and was kept in these hangars for a few months while we were preparing it for its first flight in 2012. I feel quite sort of proud to be here because my family's been involved with aviation in the Nelson province for now on 70 years. My father was flying fighters for the New Zealand Air Force in Europe in World War II, came back and then was the chief flying instructor of the Nelson Aero Club from 1946 to 1950. Then he started a small airline out of here, Northwest Airlines, flying between here and Golden Bay and Wellington, and then went to the UK, got a job flying DC-3s for British European Airways, and it was there that he learned to fly helicopters. And so he flew helicopters in England for a few years before coming back again to Nelson and setting up Helicopters New Zealand here. Then subsequent to Dad retiring, I was in the helicopter industry for a long time out of Nelson, and now my son Toby has sort of taken over it. Quite significant that we've got the Anson parked here outside number 2 hangar, which was built by the RNZAF in World War II to house the Hudsons and Vickers Wildebeest that they had based here. The Hudsons, which replaced the Ansons in the European theatre in the anti-submarine role, were based here before they went up to the Pacific, Guadalcanal. So the Anson is here to represent the New Zealand Air Force's involvement here at Nelson.
I'm Murray Vincent, Operations Manager with Origin Air here in Nelson, and I felt very privileged and fortunate to be involved with the recent celebrations, 100 years of aviation in the Nelson and Tasman region. We've got a fairly unique team here at Origin Air with a diverse skill set, and we also just provided a little bit of operational assistance in whatever way we could with liaison with air traffic control, rescue fire, local airport company, etc. And some of us who have a little bit of experience with some of the aircraft types involved and a passion for aviation history. As such, we've been eager to participate and eager to help out in whatever way we can, and just being part of the celebration.
Kia ora, ko Grant May toku ingoa. I'm Grant May, the Airport Manager for Air New Zealand here at Nelson Airport. It would have been a couple of years ago now when Richard Waugh and Graham McConnell first approached me to get Air New Zealand involved in the 100-year anniversary celebrations. My wife is Richard's niece, so Brian Waugh, the pilot, is my wife's grandfather, so we've got a family connection there to aviation as well. We arranged for the staff to get some old Air New Zealand uniforms, and the team were really excited to get those uniforms on from the 1940s through until the late 1990s. Air New Zealand's got a long and proud history here in Nelson with NAC and the predecessors of NAC, so it's important that we play our part here and support the community that supports us.
I would like to welcome everybody here, and before I go any further, I'm going to pass over to Archdeacon Harvey Ruru to bless our day today and all that's behind it.
E te mihi nā mate koutou katoa, e te maumahara I tēnei rā. So nō reira nā mate koutou, and especially on this day, in about an hour's time, on the 11th day of the 11th month, the end of World War I, Armistice Day. They shall grow not old, as that we are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them. Nō reira, e te hunga ora nā rātou ki a tātou, e te mihi ki a koe e te Richard, ki a koe e te mana o te rangatira, Korua, Paul, and Mayor Rachel, me ngā rangatira koutou katoa a tēnā koutou. Thank you for inviting me to say the karakia for this day. He honore, he korore, he maungarongo ki tātua. Wakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa tihei Māori ora. So I want to mihi to our young people. Nō reira e te mihi e te tamariki, e te rangatahi, because they are the ones that are going to be carrying on the tradition of our people. And hopefully in the next 100 years you'll be able to come back here, wherever this airport is, hopefully it's here somewhere, and that you'll be able to carry out the proud memory of especially the Newman whānau who this day really is dedicated, and all those who supported the first flight to this region. Nō reira, koutou katoa a tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
I have simply been the assistant to Graham and Richard Waugh in Auckland, and it's been a real pleasure. So the two of them, they've got tremendous knowledge, they have written their own book, and I'm going to pass over to Graham McConnell.
Well, good morning everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this special Aviation Day of significance, 11 November 2021. It's the 100th anniversary of the first aircraft to arrive in the Nelson, Tasman region. It all started with one man's dream, and it was made possible by the flying and the mechanical skills of two other men. Tom Newman, co-founder of Newman Brothers, the well-known Nelson passenger transport company, had the dream of flying home to his farm in Brightwater. Captain Phillip Shorty Fowler, he was the pilot flying the Avro 504K biplane. Also aboard was a young, I think he was 19 years old, Ted Ranish. He was the mechanic who helped keep the rotary motor in good condition, and also importantly swung the propeller for each start-up. At probably this exact time, 100 years ago, the aircraft would have been in the air out of a paddock near where Rongotai College is now, not far from the present Wellington Airport. We remember their daring deed 100 years ago, and we look forward to further aviation developments in the Nelson Tasman region in the future. Thank you.
I think it is actually really appropriate that it is Armistice Day today, that we think about the role of aviation over the last century, but also the commitment of the people who support the aviation industry. Nelson Airport was our only regional airport that remained open right through the lockdown process. So I just want to acknowledge that today and what a difference that makes to our community. Now, aviation transformed our region. These occasions are not possible without an enormous amount of work. And Graham, you have dedicated your life to aviation, and then actually recording the history and the heritage and giving us all these opportunities. So to you and Richard, thank you sincerely on behalf of our region for all that you've done. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Thank you, Rachel. And I'd like now to welcome Paul Steer, who is the chair of Nelson Airport Company.
Te he moriora, I ngā mana, I ngā rio, I ngā iwi, tēnā koutou. Moroni everybody. Nelson Airport's delighted and privileged to host this special occasion. As has been mentioned, today is Remembrance Day. That was the day in 1918 that the hostilities in the Great War, the war to end all wars, ceased. And as so often arises, necessity is the mother of invention, and so avionics made great strides during that period. And flying, while still a new wonder of technology, was now global as the war ended. The arrival of Te Waka, Rirarangi, overhead and landing in Stoke took courage, enterprise, determination and faith. Fortunately, Shorty Fowler, Ted Ranish and Tom Newman had those qualities in abundance. Equally fortunately, there wasn't a health and safety risk analysis requirement to slow them down. It took that great pioneering stuff that pervaded our forebears and gave Nelson the means to open a new portal for the city to the rest of New Zealand and the world. Finally, while we can't imagine what air travel may be like in 100 years' time, we do know that electric-powered flight is a reality, and indeed was demonstrated just 11 days ago with the Pipistrel Alpha Electro completing the first powered emission-free flight across Cook Strait. This is just the beginning of climate-supported flights, and I am confident will become very much the norm within the next 15 years. And lastly, can I say our gratitude to the members of the Fowler, Ranish and Newman families. It's good to see you all here today for their forebears' efforts in bringing us here today. So well done. Thank you very much. Kia ora.
I would now like to invite April Bamford, who is the granddaughter of Tom Newman.
We're delighted to be with you today for an event that is very close to the Newman family. As has been mentioned, today couldn't have happened without the efforts of so many who have put in so much time and have sponsored this event. However, I again reiterate, please do spare a thought for Richard Waugh, who can't be here today. Looking back to Tom, a man of determination and foresight, who had overcome obstacles as a pioneer coachman, one who had seen the death throes of the horse age and the start of the motor era. Then, aged 62, he was determined to conquer Cook Strait, and of course we wouldn't be here otherwise. My father Jack related to me that when taking the money for the scenic flights that followed, such was the demand that he could have done with larger pockets. And I look at this photograph and I well remember that my grandfather always wore a bowler hat, and it seems he had it when he flew. Following that first flight, members of the Newman family in several generations have been involved in air transport. My own father, firstly with Cook Strait Airways, then in particular my cousin David Newman was closely associated with Wellington Airport, and my daughter Victoria worked for Air New Zealand in roles ranging from flight attendant to manager for 29 years. My own personal follow-on from that flight was that from Nelson, I had a flight in a Domini, one of Cook Strait Airways ones, and tomorrow I get to fly again.
I would like to now invite Janet King to join us, and Janet is going to unveil the plaque that we have here.
I'm delighted to be here today along with my family. Ever since I was a small child, I was fascinated with my father's flight from Wellington to Nelson. I was born when my father was in his 50s, so as a teenager, whenever he talked about flight, I'd think, oh no. But now I am so proud of him and proud to be here, as is my family. Thank you.
About 10 a.m, the weather cleared a little, and Fowler said, "We're away." And we climbed aboard.
Well, Mr. Newman, we're up.
Marvellous! Wondrous! Incredible!
I'll take her up to 2,000 feet and then we'll head straight over the strait.
Thanks very much for coming, and all of you young people from Stoke School, it's great to have you here today.
It was probably a day a bit similar to this. It wasn't a bright sunny day.
My navigation tools were a compass, a cross level, and an old school atlas.
The time at the moment, it's 20 to 1. 100 years ago to this moment, the plane would have been somewhere between French Pass, D'Urville Island, and the Glen, coming along the coast.
Yes, that's the southern tip of D'Urville, there.
Oh, and there's French Pass. Well, there's Nelson Town. In my excitement, I buzzed the post office clock tower. The fuel is holding steady. I might try to squeeze out another 20 miles or so to Brightmoor.
What's that sputtering?
That'll be the engine.
We're out?
Appears so.
So we're
going to have to take emergency measures.
Well done, Mr. Fowler. Well done, Mr. Radish.
Well done to you, sir.
Yes.
That is the first flight into Nelson.
Just the beginning.
They were the first plane to arrive. They had to land here because they ran out of fuel. They were heading to Spring Grove. There were a lot of kids from Stoke School. There was the Mayor of Richmond. So it was a huge event.
My father always recounted the forced landing in James Marsden's paddock in Green Meadows, Stoke. Marsden was not impressed.
The gardener of Mr. Marsden was sent down by Mr. Marsden to this historic occasion of the first plane to land here, and Mr. Marsden said,
"Get that damn thing off my land now!" I guess he was more of a horse and cart man.
I'm Lee Oliver, and I'm the granddaughter of Ted Ranish. The unveilings of the photograph and the plaques would serve as a reminder to generations to come about faith, courage, and that pioneering spirit.
I told Mr. Fowler to try getting her up in the air again. There was another field about 2 miles distant, a bigger one, belonging to Saxton.
Finally got into the air again and flew on to Brightwater. The paddock that Mrs. Newman had pegged a seat out on to indicate where to land. The pilot looked down and said, no, that's not big enough.
This is a great occasion. I'm Patricia Linklater, granddaughter of Tom Newman and a daughter of Ross Newman.
I'm Ian Newman. Tom Newman was my grandfather. My father, Ross Newman, was Tom Newman's youngest son. He was 10 at the time of the flight, and prior to the flight arriving, he helped his mother, my Nana Newman, pegging down the sheet on the family farm paddock so Shorty Fowler could land there.
Well, the next thing, the plane flies over, straight over.
They sat there and watched the flight continue over, which apparently the paddock was too short.
Oh, there's William Arnold's property, Spring Grove. He has a nice big field.
So he continued to Spring Grove here, so Dad and his mum and Uncle Jack.
Very, very upset.
Got in the car and rushed here to see the flight landing here.
Well, we set her down in Arnold's field and were immediately surrounded by a large crowd of children and adults.
This is a field very close to where the first plane arrived into Spring Grove. There was a big gathering of people here.
We got the first aircraft through to Nelson, and I got home to Nauheim. So, all in all, I had to be happy with that.
Oh, exactly.
First aircraft to fly to Nelson region in William Arnold's property. This is where he landed. It was Mr. Arnold's paddock.
My name's Tim King. I'm the Mayor of the Tasman District Council. It's been a real pleasure to be involved over the last few days with the celebration or commemoration of the first flight 100 years ago in 1921. Also to celebrate some of the people who were involved in that event way back then.
There's 3 generations of us down here to commemorate my father's flight from Wellington, Lau Bay to Nelson in 1921. He really was very much into aviation, just loved the whole thing, the whole experience. He liked being a pioneer.
Yesterday they said my granddad was 19, but actually he'd just had his 18th birthday a week before the flight. And so he told probably a porky about that.
And the operator said, well, Moths do it all right, but we can only take one passenger, so can we have something with a bit more passenger space in it? So basically, the DH-83 came into being by making a new fuselage which can take 3 in the front and the pilot up the back. Noisy aeroplanes? I don't know. No. Oh, that's the Anson. Quite bird's coincidence, the Anson going past there is flown by Bill Reid. My first flight in an aeroplane was from this very field in 1948, and it cost me 8 shillings for 8 minutes because it was 1948 and I was 8. And that was with John Reid, who was Bill's father. The aeroplane behind us is the DH-84 Dragon. This one was built for the Royal Australian Air Force as a navigation trainer in World War II. This was the first aeroplane which was released from the military by the War Assets Realisation Group. It was used by the Nelson Aero Club for their charter work and general ambulance work. We finally got it back in the air in '97. We've been flying it around since then. As it was here with Nelson Aero Club and the work that it did here, it was deemed appropriate to come back as part of the doings.
So yesterday celebrated the 100th anniversary of aviation for the region. But more importantly, we're here today to acknowledge what occurred on the 21st of November 1921. The touchdown of the plane that was captained by Phillip Fowler, with passengers Mr Tom Newman and his wife Christina, made their first landing, all but to a surprise of Mr Livesey, who had a paddock in the vicinity of Havilland Street in Motueka. Later that same day, a second aircraft piloted by Herbert Nelson Walker arrived with passengers George Newman, Miss Lyons and Mr F Mocker. Certainly today is part of those celebrations. It's acknowledging a milestone that's happened in Motueka in terms of aviation, and it was really amazing to see the amount of people that have come out. And there's a plaque that's going to be entrusted to the Motueka Aero Club to recognise that milestone. So on behalf of the Motueka community, can I present this to Paul?
The aviation never leaves you. You always got it, and there's always that passion there. And it's just amazing to see all these people here. It's awesome to see. So thank you very much.
Now when you look at the airport, the growth that is here, which started 100 years ago, is absolutely fantastic. Congratulations to everybody that's been involved, and happy birthday.
I'm Kevin York and this is my wife Pam. The first landing was down in the township in Motueka. The Aero Club started in March 1934 and the club went into recess in 1958 and then it was restarted again in 1963 and it's gone from strength to strength and over the years.
I was the first private pilot of the resurrected Aero Club. Ideal place to fly, the contour of the land, the sea as well as the mountain.
We had club members out working the tobacco, raising money to build the first hangar. All of these wonderful hangars were not there, even the lovely club rooms. Things were very different then.
The actual airport itself now is getting quite a few hangars with vintage aviation being quite an enthusiastic following.
The aircraft was designed in the late 1920s. It's a Peton pole. It's an American design. Originally made to be powered with a Model A Ford auto engine. They didn't perform that well, but they did perform. So I started building this one in 2008. I finished it in 2016, and it's got a 110 horsepower engine on it.
I'm Mark Woodhouse. I'm a flying instructor here at Motueka Aero Club. This aeroplane was built in 1948, so it's just become 72 years old. So technology-wise, when it was first built, it was relatively what we call steam-driven in terms of its instrumentation. Technology has developed to the point now where we're fortunate to have airliners allowing us to fly all around the world to visit family and do business. And the details of that technology is just amazing, really. In the time when the first aeroplane landed in the region, it was the only aeroplane flying for hundreds and hundreds of miles. Nowadays, there are hundreds of aeroplanes flying in quite congested airspace, and this technology allows us to operate safely in that environment.
Great to see so many school kids, and I guess it just highlights both the impression that aviation made back in 1921, and also how aviation still sparks people's imagination right through to today. So congratulations from all of us at the Tasman District Council to everyone who's been involved in turning on an awesome event.
I'm Alec Waugh. I'm the 100th Nelson Tasman Aviation Dinner Coordinator. Happened to be Richard Waugh's eldest brother. Dad, of course, was a pioneer aviator. Brian Waugh, Dominies, Beechcraft, Electras, Nelson, Christchurch, and of course the coast. And Pioneer Aircraft has been part of my life.
I'm Victoria Bamford. I'm the great-granddaughter of Tom Newman. And aviation, he started it and I carried it on. I ended up with Air New Zealand as the Aircraft Interiors Manager for 29 years. So it was a great start and we're very, very proud of him.
He was a man of his time and actually foresighted, determined that he was going to be the first person, of course, to land in Nelson, which he did. Third time lucky.
I'd like to acknowledge the Fowler, Newman and Ranish families.
It's been an incredible experience for us and all the other families. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Richard and Graham, thank you so much for what you've done. The understanding and memories and all of the history that they've got and know and remember is quite frankly staggering.
This is the photo taken by Frederick Nelson Jones at about 1:45 on the 11th day of November 1921, and it shows a little speck up in the sky above the Nelson Post Office, and that's the first photograph that we have of an aeroplane over Nelson. A short time later, the plane arrived running out of petrol. And here we see it with the Turf Hotel in the background on the right and the Methodist Church on the other side of Songa Street. Interestingly, that's the only photograph that I've ever seen of the plane at its first landing spot. 2 days later, another plane arrived in Nelson, and it was piloted by Mr. Hawker. A few days later on Tahunanui Beach, people lining up to book a ride, I think probably about £1 at a time. On the 17th of March 1933, Charles Kingsford Smith in the Southern Cross flew across Nelson. At the end of 1935, a local Nelson-based company, Cook Strait Airways Limited, formed. Cook Strait Airways was the first scheduled air service to link the North and South Islands. On the 8th of October 1938, the official opening of Nelson Airport. A huge crowd of people turned out. During the war, Nelson Airport was RNZAF Station Nelson, Nelson Aero Club, Tiger Moth. One of the earliest colour photographs at Nelson Airport, NAC Lockheed Lodestar. That aircraft earlier, when it was with the RNZAF, was the first British Allied aircraft to land on Japanese soil. Now we've got South Island Airways. It was a little airline that started up and started the first scheduled flights to Christchurch from Nelson. A bit later on, we've got the DC-3 on the left and a Heron on the right, a 4-engine Heron operated by NAC. Trans-Island Airways was the next small airline that started from Nelson, and the pilot directly beneath the motor, Brian Chadwick, who a few years later went missing on a flight between Christchurch and Milford Sound, never been found, so bad things can happen. For 30 years, Nelson was serviced by Bristol freighters, roared in and out of Nelson, carrying all sorts of things. Fokker Friendship, NAC, a nice looking aeroplane. Ron King in the control tower at Nelson, he was a well-known figure. The last DC-3 flight out of Nelson. It's a Saab outside the 1975 terminal after it had some additions. Q300 Bombardier. The airport staff came McNabb there with the Airport of the Year trophy. And that's it.
would you like to stand and for us to remember those that have gone before? So we've talked tonight about the first flyers, but all of this that's gone before us. So if you wouldn't mind standing, and we'll just have a moment's silence for the pioneers and for those that have lost their lives in air accidents, and to give us what we have today, which is a wonderful, safe way of travelling. Thank you very much.
It's a real pleasure to be here tonight to celebrate this incredible occasion. It's a memory that I've grown up with as a child. Captain Shorty Fowler was my grandfather, and the strength of this occasion is actually in the record and the memory that we're recording tonight for future generations.
That now brings us to Robert Ingalls, who is now going to give us some thoughts and reflections of Nelson Aviation.
Welcome aboard, friends. What an entree, really, that first flight was for the next 100 years of aviation in Nelson. If you look back, I mean, it's been staggering, the development that's occurred since that first flight. Thinking back at the time that the flight took place, my parents were still almost young, but travelling to their village in a horse and cart. And yet, through their lives, they got to see the development of scheduled air transport. They observed supersonic aircraft and spacecraft, and even saw a man landing on the moon. Richard asked me to talk about the last 50 years, and that spans the period before transport deregulation, which occurred at the end of '83, and of course the years since. Back in the day, or then, you could operate an air service anywhere you cared to in New Zealand, as long as Air New Zealand didn't go there, or NAC as it was then. So the options were a bit thin. Moving on to the operators that there's been over the years, there's three very prominent Nelson companies in this list that I really just do want to mention. In the 50s, a company operated by John Reed, who with later helicopter fame, of course, operated a service called Northwest Airlines between Nelson and Takaka, and he did that with a Miles Gemini, which is a small twin-engine aeroplane, and I'm told that they only had 90 horsepower each side, so I guess you wouldn't want one to stop. In the late 50s, Trans Island Airways operated from Christchurch up to Nelson. Another operation from Nelson, Bill Evans' Golden Coast Airways, and Bill started operating between Nelson and Westport, Karamea and Takaka, and that was initially with a Oster, and then the Cessnas, and later a Piper Apache. And I can remember farming in Motueka at the time and looking up and seeing this bright red Apache going overhead, and whoa, that's looked pretty cool. So then along came deregulation at the end of 1983, and I'm sure some of you will recall you hardly had to book a seat on an aeroplane. You could just about walk on the wings. There were so many operators trying their luck in Nelson, just about like bees round a honeypot. And I'll mention a few operators that have been in the business since then. Air Albatross, of course, was operating then, and they expanded and with their Metro 2s to run a comprehensive schedule out of Nelson. We outfit in Motueka changed its name to become Air Nelson, and initially made a start in the city with half a dozen Piper Chieftains. The Ansett subsidiaries then rocked up to make life even more difficult. Origin Pacific operated for a dozen or so years in conjunction with Qantas, you know, those underarm bowlers that have got a rodent on their tail. And a bit like the Black Caps, the ones still batting, Air New Zealand, of course, with a fair bit of help from the ever-suffering taxpayer, you can see that they must be in trouble, because they even had to rent out their flight attendants tonight to the Rutherfords. So, it's a bit tough, isn't it? And of course, still operating Sounds Air, Origin Air and Golden Bay Air. So nearly 30 operators over what's a relatively short period of time by aviation standards. And I suppose that all says that it's a pretty tough old business. Looking back over the years from our involvement, of course it's a tough industry, but I don't ever remember the years that you made $1 or the years when you didn't. The thing that you really remember is the people that we worked with, and we've been fortunate, as I'm sure most operators have, of being able to work with fabulous people over the years, very skilled and dedicated, and really that's what's made it all worthwhile as far as I'm concerned, and to be fair, still does. If we're all back here in 100 years' time, well, the Rutherford will be here, I guess. I suppose that rather than going out front to grab a cab, we'll go up to the roof and grab a pilotless Uber and pop to the airport, where we'll get on an electric turboprop that'll take us somewhere to get on a, hydrogen-powered jet. The good news is, folks, while you've been sleeping, we've now landed safely on the moon. So just watch your heads on the door on the way out, and of course no cell phones on the tarmac. For your weekend here, I'm told that the restaurants on Neil Armstrong Drive and on Crater Street are absolutely excellent. The atmosphere is still not what it could be. So thank you for listening, and good night.
Would you like to stand and raise your glasses to those that have gone before and those that we have got ahead of us to aviation?